Hello and welcome to the Bulletin with UBS on Monocle Radio. Each week, the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in finance take you beyond the numbers and hype, right to the heart of the big issues of the day. In this last of 3 special episodes of the programme, we're wrapping up our exploration of the meaning of craft in today's world. Craft is not just about what you do, but also how you go about doing it. A universal set of values that includes attention to detail, a hands-on approach, and a determination to deliver the highest quality product possible. These core principles are the same no matter your métier, from the world of banking via bespoke furniture to the robotics innovations of tomorrow. Craft is an ability to gaze both backwards and forwards, to recognise heritage and skill and combine it with a compelling vision. In this series, Monocle and UBS have been interrogating how these tenets come to life across different industries and asking why craft matters, or explaining why it should, whatever your discipline. Today we wrap up with another testimonial from a craftsman and designer who's here to share more about his unique approach. The sector or space perhaps doesn't matter. If you're committed to raising your work to a level of art, you're engaging in a contemporary form of craft. For UBS, this means bringing a consistent level of dedication, care, creativity and precision to the world of finance. Honed over more than 160 years, this approach is one that places the customer at the centre of every important decision. It also involves doing the fundamentals very well while having the courage to explore new avenues and to evolve. Designer Charles O. Job subscribes to a similar mantra. His playful attitude towards craft eschews simple categorization, yet he makes practical products that fulfill both design briefs and customer needs. Born in Lagos and based in Zurich, Job has featured in international design competitions and been a professor of architectural design theory at the Bern University of Applied Sciences since 2008. As our series examining craft in all its forms concludes, we learn why his design philosophy stems from a desire to create with purpose.
So I actually grew up with this idea of people actually, you didn't go to the stores and buy whatever you need. You actually went out and looked for mostly waste material. And then we try and do some kind of magic on it and turn this waste into something we wanted. So that's how I kind of grew up in an atmosphere where people did things, people make things. They weren't designers and they weren't producers in that sense, but they were designing their own. I have a need and I need to solve it. So I go out, look out for things that are out there and I transform them into what I need. I suppose that's how I see craft as something transformative. We're transforming something from a raw state to a higher state, so to speak. And it doesn't mean in terms of money. It just means in terms of worth. Something that could be less worthy could be turned into something more worthy. So that's how I see what I do. I turn things, quite often small things, quite often practical things, from one state to the other. That's how I see crafting. You're crafting something, you're making something out of something else. My first ever creation was a watch, which doesn't work. We used to go out and find the watch face, and that used to be, when we were kids, there was a product called Vicks Rob, which is when you had a cold. It's like a small, flat, round metal container. So what you do is you take one of these things and you rub them on the ground, really for like hours, till they fell apart. So the cover fell apart. So you had a hole. So you made a hole by friction. So you have a ring. Which is like a watch face. And then you get some plastic thread. You kind of thread. You make the strap out of a thread, which actually you whip yourself. So you whip the strap, you put the strap on the clock face. You didn't have a clock face, but you had a decorative element which looked like a clock. And then you go out and look for a piece of glass, and you kind of break it, and it's like almost the same kind of circumference as your metal. And then you grind that on the ground as well till it's round. And then you insert it into the tin face, and that was your watch. So it took about 2 days to do that. So that was my first ever achievement of actually having a wish to do something, going out and putting it together, and then wearing it. I wore it for like months. So that was my first ever experience of making something, or crafting something out of nothing. people think of design as something that's going to sit there. And, my take on design is doing something useful, doing something with a purpose, doing something with a function, and using so little material as possible to make this something. Basically, I say to myself, I make the most out of the least. And that's how that kind of affected the way I think. There's a German word, Gebrauchsgegenstände, which means objects for use. Gebrauch is to use, Gegenstand is object. So that's how I make things. They just assume I make things. But what I'm trying to say is what I do isn't art. It really is very practical. So I make useful things. When I moved from London to Zurich, I realized that actually what we've lost in England is the fact that people have apprenticeships here. They learn a trade for 4 years. We don't have that in England anymore. So people don't know how to make stuff. And people know how to make stuff in Switzerland and they make it really, really well. So that has informed what I do. Because, if I design something, I have a carpenter just down the road from me. And I go to him and we sit there and he'll make it. And he'll make it brilliantly. And it costs you, but he makes it really, really well. But in London, you'd have to kind of travel for hours or days to find somebody who could actually make it. So that informs what I do. So people know their trade so they can help me in trying to realize what I want to do. In Paris, I learned to be a bit more relaxed about stuff because I finished architecture in England, in London. Then I went to Paris to look for work, and I found it really vibrant because there were lots of young people that were looking for stuff and doing stuff and reinventing themselves. So basically, moving from a country to another helped me to kind of, always reinvent myself. So suddenly I came to Switzerland and I became a designer, although I was actually an architect. So you could actually start again. It leaves you a freedom to redefine what you do and what you like to do. When I was studying architecture, because I was actually a lot more interested in fashion design, because I wasn't actually focused on just making buildings. I like design, but I wasn't focused on making. I did lots of competitions when I was a student, and I won quite a few competitions, but I wasn't actually interested in building them. I was more interested in the idea of doing something, of making something, of actually fantasizing about something. But he was like an architect. You have to know how to build. You have to build, otherwise you're not an architect. But I was interested in design. I was interested in fashion. And he reckoned fashion was just ephemeral, But I said, why can't we kind of marry fashion with design and do something with architecture and do something else architectural with textiles? But he wasn't really convinced about that, unfortunately. But he wasn't a good architect anyway. I always wanted to kind of find out what I think about stuff and what's my take on something. That's why I do lots of competitions, because I'd say, okay, it's a challenge. I've got 3 months. What is my view of it? What's my take on it? And I still do that today. I'm doing 3 competitions at a time. I do almost 3 competitions a year as training for my brain. So I always take my students out of Switzerland. Last time we were in Egypt, we built a pavilion in Egypt, a mud pavilion in Egypt. So just to show them the world and get them to do stuff with their hands. It's stuff that I did as a kid. So basically we made furniture using palm fronds, and then we made pavilion using Adobe methods. And next, in July, I'm going to Shenzhen to teach some students in China. So basically, I like to go out and do stuff, but the students have to make stuff. So we leave the computer behind, and we use our hands, and we craft things, and we will make things, and we realize architecture isn't just about buildings. Architecture is about everything to do with living. And that's what I tell my students. It's not just about bricks and mortar. It's about spaces we live in. And then those spaces are made of stuff. They're made of things. And these things are made by people, with the architects. And so I try and show them that doing is my mantra. You think and then you do. What I do is I do a lot of competitions. Again, just to kind of test my take on whatever it is. And once I have an idea for a product, I then look out for a producer that might be interested in the idea, and I call them up. And quite often they say no. And when they do say yes, then we develop it together, and then it becomes a product. So that's how I do that. So basically, because I'm teaching 3 days a week, I don't actually have time to have a normal studio. So it works for me. So I have an idea, I work it out, and then I sell the idea to a producer. And actually, I'm working on something right now. I was invited to take part in the Dakar Biennale, which is in Senegal. So I had an idea, and I was in Lagos for an event, and I met a producer from Angola. So now I'm working on products. He will produce it, and then we'll take it to Dakar, to the Biennale, and then hopefully after the Biennale, he'll produce it and bring it on the market. So basically, I have my idea, I work it out to prototype, I pay for everything, I have a prototype, and then I go out and try and find someone to produce it. I am always drawing. I am on the tram. I don't go anywhere specific. I have my pencil, I have my sketchbook, and my eyes open, and I'm stealing ideas from the world. So it's all for free. So I'm on the move. I have my sketchbook, and that's all I have. And that's all I need, really, because there's so much around you. There's so much inspiration around you. You just have to kind of see them or be open to them. When I was a child, I used to draw a lot. My father said, "Oh, you should be an architect." I thought it out because my father said I should be an architect. I've always drawn. I've always liked to draw. I don't draw that well, but I just like drawing. So basically, that kind of turned into a habit, and I have thousands of sketchbooks now. My first design in Switzerland was actually, I made a rattan CD stand, which is like a sculpture. And I realized that actually quite often there's only so much you can do by yourself because I don't have knowledge. So I went out to look for people who actually do know how to do these things. So I decided to not to make it myself because it just wasn't me. So what I've learned with time is look for the right partners, look for the right people, have the ideas, and then sit together and kind of work out how to make the thing function. I don't try and do anything by myself because I can't. But if you find the right people who are open to the ideas, and it's the best way to do it. I think you'd have to be quite open-minded and quite ready for people to say no. A lot of people say no at the beginning. Because on my first table I designed in Switzerland, I went to a guy who lives like 5 minutes from me. He's got a carpentry shop. And I said, "I'd like to do this." And he looked at me and said, "I'm not doing that." I said, "Well, what's the problem?" "Yeah, it's not stable. It's never going to work." So, of course, he was right. But I just wanted to try something else, and he wasn't really keen on something else. I mean, he had the knowledge to know just by looking at the drawings that it wasn't going to work, and it didn't work. But I made him do it because I said, "Listen, I'll pay you," and then he made my idea work in the end because it didn't work as a carpenter. But what he learned from me, and I learned from him, so we both learned from each other. But that means you have to be able to kind of talk to people and try and find a middle ground. Be diplomatic, because quite often people are quite rude. They say, "No, that's never going to work." But don't take too personally, because that's their trade. That's what they do. So they know certain things. So being open is actually one thing, and then being able to kind of talk to people and find out where their limits are. They can only go so far, and then they say no way, because they've got their pride. So being able to kind of talk to people and find a balance between when they say yes and when they say maybe and when they say no.
And that is designer Charles O. Job, concluding UBS and Monocle's special season exploring craft and understanding why it's not just about what you do, but also how you go about doing it. You can listen again to this and to both of the other previous episodes in the series and explore more by visiting monocle.com. That's where you can join the club and subscribe to Monocle magazine too. You can also follow the programme wherever you get your podcasts. And as ever, you can discover more and find out how UBS can help you by heading over to ubs.com. This is the Bulletin with UBS on Monocle Radio. I'm Tom Edwards. Thanks for listening.